Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to continue talking about establishing the new nation and getting the Constitution not only written but also ratified. The debate over ratification. The delegates to the Constitutional Convention had designed a strong federal government. As you learned, all but 3 delegates endorsed the new Constitution, despite the fact that many felt it was imperfect. After most of the delegates signed it, the proposed Constitution was printed, circulated, and hotly debated. The question remained whether the states would accept the proposed plan. If they did not, what would become of the new nation? You know, they kind of bet everything on the Constitution passing. But if the states don't accept it, what do we do now? So, let's see how that plays out. By drafting a new Constitution, the delegates had exceeded their mandate. They were only supposed to propose amendments to the Articles of Confederation. Official approval or ratification of an entirely new Constitution was doomed if all 13 states had to approve it as the Articles required. To improve the odds of ratification, the delegates arbitrarily decided to change the rules. Under these new rules, delegates determined that approval by 9 states would suffice. They also took the ratification decision away from the state legislatures, for they would most certainly oppose a new constitution that would deprive them of some power. Instead, the delegates ruled that the specially elected conventions would determine a state's choice for or against the Constitution. So, they didn't want to leave this up to the state legislatures because, as we discussed in class, the Constitution is going to set up a stronger federal government and weaker state governments. So they were afraid that if they left it up to the state legislatures, they would not approve it because it was going to strip some power from them. So they decided instead to make it this whole special thing. There were going to be delegates from each of the states to discuss it. Federalists and Anti-Federalists face off. 2 groups soon emerged in the debate. The Federalists, who favored ratification of the Constitution, and the Anti-Federalists, who opposed it. The Federalists included George Washington, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton. They stressed the weakness of the Articles and argued that only a new government based on the proposed Constitution could overcome the difficulties facing the new nation. So, people such as George Washington here are going to be Federalists, meaning that they supported a government that had a strong federal government, which is what the Constitution proposed. Anti-Federalists argue against a strong government. Critics of the Constitution, known as Anti-Federalists, denounced it as a retreat from the liberty won by the Revolution. The Anti-Federalists especially disliked that the Constitution lacked a Bill of Rights to protect basic liberties from the powers of the government. Anti-Federalists also noted that the Constitution greatly increased the powers of the central government and provided a more elitist government by concentrating power in relatively few hands at a great distance from most voters. The Anti-Federalists believed that liberty could not survive unless the federal government remained weak, which meant the most power would belong to the democratic state governments. So they were once again afraid of just creating a new tyrant. You know, they didn't want a strong federal government because that's what Britain had. So, you know, it's not hard to understand that they wouldn't want to just rush right back into the same situation. They had friends and family members that bled and died. A lot of them served in the Revolutionary War, so they were soldiers themselves. They watched people around them get gunned down and die. To get out from under this sort of situation, why would they just create one of their own? So you can understand why the Anti-Federalists were so opposed to this. The Federalists win support. Most farmers recognized that the Constitution threatened the state debtor relief laws that had rescued their farms from foreclosure. Common farmers also distrusted the lawyers, merchants, and other wealthy men who promoted the Constitution, viewing them as aristocrats hostile to the Republic. In South Carolina, farmers protested by staging a mock funeral around a coffin with the word liberty painted on the side. Because most citizens were farmers, the proposed Constitution lacked majority support in 1787. However, the Constitution had the support of two of the most popular and trusted men in America, George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. Their support allayed the fears of many rural Americans. Some frontier farmers also endorsed the Constitution because they hoped that a stronger nation would defeat the American Indians and take control of the British forts along the Great Lakes. So there are going to be different groups that support the Federalists because they have something to gain from this strong federal government. The Federalists also enjoyed popular support in key places, the seaports, which hosted most of the ratifying conventions. Unlike the common farmers, most urban artisans supported the Constitution. Hurt by the Depression of the 1780s, the artisans hoped that a strong national government could expand American commerce. The seaports also had most of the nation's newspapers, the printers of which strongly endorsed the Constitution. The Federalists were also better organized than the Anti-Federalists, acting quickly after the Constitutional Convention. The Federalists built a nationwide network of support. Their national experience and connections gave them a great advantage in coordinating the first national political campaign. By contrast, the Anti-Federalists were state politicians who struggled to build alliances across state lines. The Federalist Papers. The Federalist cause for ratification of the Constitution appeared in The Federalist, a series of 85 essays that came to be called the Federalist Papers. Three leading Federalists, Madison, Hamilton, and John Jay, wrote the essays, which were published in New York newspapers in 1787 and 1788, a time of heated debate in New York's ratifying convention. The essays argued that the separation of powers in three branches of government would prevent the concentration of power dreaded by the Anti-Federalists. The authors were also eager for the United States to have a strong central government, as supported by Madison and the Federalist No. 10. Federalist leaders feared that the United States would dissolve without a strong government. They argued in the Federalist No. 51 that the checks and balances in the Constitution prevented any of the three branches from gaining too much power. The authors insisted that the real threat to liberty came from the state legislatures, which lacked sufficient checks and balances. Hamilton wrote of the importance of a judicial branch in the Federalist No. 78. Today, these essays help scholars, judges, and lawyers understand the meaning of the Constitution. A lot of people who have made law decisions will refer back to the Federalist Papers to try to glean extra understanding about the Constitution that goes beyond the words on the document. If you can get a better understanding of the way that the Founding Fathers felt about certain topics, maybe something that isn't super clear in the Constitution, you can figure out how they would have wanted it. Ratifying conventions in the states. Exploiting their advantages, the Federalists pushed for quick ratifying conventions in 5 states. By mid-January 1788, the Federalists had won ratifications in Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and Connecticut. These early victories generated momentum. To complete ratifications, the Federalists needed only 4 of the remaining 8 states, but the Anti-Federalists mounted a stronger fight in those states. Massachusetts legislators debated the proposed Constitution at Boston's Old State House, shown here. So this was a place in Massachusetts where the Founding Fathers debated ratifying the Constitution. In Massachusetts, the Federalists faced defeat until they made 2 key concessions to sway the moderate Anti-Federalists. Led by Governor John Hancock, first the Federalists appealed to Hancock's vanity. They hinted that he could become the nation's first vice president by switching sides. Second, to make that switch easier, they promised to support key amendments to the Constitution. They would add a Bill of Rights, but only after ratifications, not as a condition for it. In early February, following Hancock's lead, the Massachusetts Convention ratified the Constitution. The promise of a Bill of Rights helped the Federalists win most of the remaining states. Maryland ratified in April, South Carolina in May, and New Hampshire in early June. They provided the winning 9, but the new nation would not last without the support of Virginia and New York. In late June, Virginia narrowly ratified, despite the forceful opposition of Patrick Henry, the greatest political orator of his generation. In July, New York also narrowly approved after Hamilton threatened New York City's secession from the state to join the Union if the state rejected the Constitution. So, that is how they got the Constitution ratified. They used some tricks up their sleeves, but they got it done. With the ratification of 11 states, the Congress of the Confederation made plans for the establishment of the new government and chose New York City as a temporary capital. The new Congress convened there on March 4th, 1789, in Federal Hall. Plans for electing the nation's first president and vice president were made. Within a short time, Rhode Island and North Carolina, which had previously rejected the Constitution, reconsidered and joined the Union. Okay guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. I hope everybody's having a great day, and I'll see you again real soon.